Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. My name is Mariah Whitfield, and I was 39 years old when my husband's family tried to replace me at my own dining table. The laughter stopped so suddenly that even the ice in the glasses sounded loud. A woman in a cream dress stood beside the chair Velma had saved for her, smiling nervously and holding a bouquet she clearly wished she had never accepted. My husband, Quentin, sat at the center of the table with his hands folded, pretending confusion while refusing to look at me. His mother stood beside him like she had rehearsed the moment for months. The strangest part was not that they brought another woman into my home and treated her as if she already belonged there. The strangest part was that not one of them understood that the mansion they were using to humiliate me legally belonged to me. I had never been the loudest person in any room. People mistook my silence for weakness because I rarely corrected them. I carried myself with a calm confidence that irritated people who depended on drama. I did not brag, compete, or announce every accomplishment online. I simply handled business. 5 years earlier, after my father died, I inherited Whitfield Commercial Holdings, a company with warehouses, trucking contracts, industrial properties, and commercial real estate across Maryland, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. My father's attorney, Donovan Price, advised privacy from the beginning, and I listened. My marriage had a separate property agreement. My inheritance moved through a trust, and the titles were clean. Quentin's family knew we lived well, but they never cared enough to understand why. Quentin knew more than they did, but not enough. That was partly because he never asked and partly because he enjoyed the lifestyle without being interested in the structure behind it. When we married, I never made him feel small for earning less or being uncertain about his career. I paid off the last of his business school debt after he lost his job at a consulting firm in Baltimore. I introduced him to executives, helped him prepare for interviews, and sat beside him when his confidence fell apart. When his first small logistics venture failed, I covered the vendor balances quietly so his name would not be damaged. I never brought it up at family gatherings. I never made him thank me in public. I believed loyalty was supposed to protect, not embarrass. In the beginning, Quentin admired that. He told his friends I was grounded. He told me he loved that I did not need applause. Back then he worked hard, respected me, and defended me when his mother made little comments. Then his career stalled again, and my company kept growing. Something changed in him slowly, almost politely at first. He began acting as if my independence was an insult. If I stayed late at the office, I was neglectful. If I came home early, I was showing off my control over my schedule. If I handled a property negotiation well, he became quiet for the rest of the evening. I suggested counseling and honest conversations. He said he was fine, and because I loved him, I tried to believe him. His mother, Velma Whitfield, made believing him harder. Velma thought every successful man deserved admiration without accountability. She disguised her opinions as tradition. Whenever she visited our home in Potomac, Maryland, she found a way to criticize me. "You work too much," Velma said. "You do not smile enough. You should be more attentive. You should think about making Quentin happier." At first, I ignored her. Then I kept ignoring her. Eventually, I mastered ignoring her, and that annoyed her more than arguments ever could. Velma wanted reactions. I gave her silence and closed doors. One Sunday afternoon, Velma sat in my living room while I reviewed acquisition documents on my tablet. She shook her head dramatically. "You know, successful men need support," Velma said. I looked up and said, "They do." "I am glad you agree." Then I returned to my reading. Velma frowned. "That is all you have to say?" she asked. "What response were you hoping for?" I asked. She crossed her arms. "You always act like you are smarter than everyone." "No," I said calmly. "I just do not enjoy unnecessary conversations." Quentin walked in carrying coffee, heard her complain, and instead of defending me, he looked at me with irritation. "What happened now?" he asked, as if I were the disturbance in my own house. That was when I first saw it clearly. Lately, everything about me irritated Quentin. My calmness, my patience, my independence, and especially the fact that I did not need his permission to stand tall. Maybe my quiet confidence reminded him of what he had not accomplished. Whatever the reason, the distance between us widened. A few months later, he met Shanice Benton. She worked for an event management firm in Washington, D.C. She was 28, outgoing, polished, and very impressed by the version of Quentin he presented to her. He told her he was trapped in an unhappy marriage. He told her I did not appreciate him. He told her divorce was already being discussed. None of that was true. One evening, Quentin and Shanice sat together at an upscale restaurant near the waterfront. I learned about it later, but I could almost hear the confidence in his voice. How much longer? Shanice asked. Quentin reached across the table and touched her hand. Not much longer, he said. You promise? She asked. I do, he said. She smiled because he made certainty sound like a plan. She did not know Quentin had confused desire with paperwork, his mother's approval with legal reality, and my silence with surrender. Promises are easy when reality feels far away. Reality was already sitting beside me in trust records, title documents, bank statements, and years of patience. Velma discovered the affair by accident when she saw Quentin texting. Instead of being upset that her married son was deceiving his wife, she became excited. When she learned about Shanice, she practically celebrated. Finally, she had found someone she considered soft enough, agreeable enough, impressed enough. Everything she believed I was not. Within weeks, Velma started encouraging the relationship. Then she crossed a dangerous line. She began introducing Shanice to relatives as family. Not as Quentin's girlfriend, but as family. One cousin raised an eyebrow and asked, "What about Mariah?" Velma waved him off. "That situation is temporary," she said. The cousin answered, "Mariah is still his wife." Velma smiled. "Not for long. She will have to accept it soon." I noticed the changes before anyone confessed. Late nights, secretive phone calls, sudden business trips that matched no actual business. A new password on a phone he used to leave on the kitchen counter. Cologne before errands. A sharp little smile when he thought I was not watching. I was not foolish. I knew something was happening. But I was not interested in chasing evidence like a desperate woman in a hallway. People reveal themselves when you stop interrupting their performance. One night, Quentin arrived home after midnight and found me in the library reading. "You are still awake?" he asked. "Apparently," I said. "You could have gone to bed," he said. "I could have," I said. He shifted uncomfortably. "You are not going to ask where I was?" "No," I said. "Why not?" he asked. I turned a page. "Because if you wanted me to know, you would tell me." He stared at me, frustrated because guilty people expect accusations. My calm gave him nowhere to hide. "I was with friends," Quentin said. "Okay," I said. "That is it?" he asked. "That is it," I said. He walked upstairs angry, and I kept reading. I had already started documenting patterns. Because when people choose betrayal, facts become protection. I saved dates, expenses, phone records that passed through shared accounts, hotel charges he thought I would not notice, and screenshots he accidentally exposed on the family tablet. I did not confront him. I organized. Quentin mistook quiet for ignorance. That mistake became expensive. Months passed, and Velma decided waiting was taking too long. She wanted me gone, not eventually, immediately. So she organized a family dinner at my house. Officially, it was for a birthday. Unofficially, it was a public trial where I was supposed to sit politely while another woman was placed beside my husband. The invitation looked normal. On the afternoon of the dinner, I wore a simple black dress, elegant and controlled. People greeted me warmly, because most of Quentin's relatives genuinely liked me. Velma noticed, and it irritated her. The dining room filled with relatives, family friends, and a few people who should have known better. Dinner began normally. Conversations moved around the table. Food arrived. Then the front door opened. Shanice entered carrying flowers, her smile fading the moment she saw how many people were present. The room went silent. One uncle nearly dropped his fork. A cousin whispered, "What is happening?" Velma stood as if she had been waiting for her cue. "There she is," she said brightly. Shanice hesitated. "Hello, everyone," she said. Nobody answered at first. Then Velma walked over, embraced her, and said, "Come sit beside Quentin." Every eye moved toward me. I slowly placed my napkin beside my plate. I was not angry. I was not shocked. I was observing. Quentin cleared his throat. "Mom," he said. Velma ignored him. "We are all family here," Velma said. A cousin muttered, "No, we are not." I looked from Velma to Quentin. "Should someone explain?" I asked. My voice stayed calm, and somehow that made everything worse. Velma lifted her chin. "Fine," she said. Quentin looked horrified, but not horrified enough to stop her. That mattered. His silence became part of the betrayal. Velma continued, "Quentin deserves happiness." The table held its breath. She pointed toward Shanice. This young woman makes him happy. One aunt covered her mouth. Another guest looked down at her plate. I folded my hands. I see, I said. Velma mistook my composure for surrender. That was a huge mistake. Some women know when it is time to step aside, Velma said. The embarrassment spread around the room like smoke. Even Shanice looked uncomfortable. Velma was not finished. You focused on business for years, Mariah. Maybe it is time to accept reality. My son deserves a wife who puts him first. I looked at Quentin then. He did not defend me. He did not say, this is wrong. He did not tell Shanice to leave or his mother she had gone too far. Instead, he sat there with his jaw tight, letting them measure me for replacement in the house I paid taxes on. That was the moment my marriage ended in my heart. The paperwork came later, but the ending began at that table. I smiled slightly, and several people became nervous because it was not the smile of a defeated woman. It was the smile of someone who knew the room had walked into its own trap. Velma noticed it too. What are you smiling about? She asked. I stood slowly and looked at Shanice. How long have you known my husband? I asked. Shanice swallowed. About 8 months, she said. Quentin's face tightened. And what exactly has he told you about our marriage? I asked. Quentin stood. That is enough, he said. I glanced at him. No, I think it is a fair question. Velma rolled her eyes, but Shanice answered. He told me the marriage was over, she said. A few relatives exchanged looks. Anything else? I asked. Shanice's voice softened. He said you two were only together on paper. He said you barely spoke. He said divorce discussions had already started. This time even Velma looked surprised, because that lie had apparently been for Shanice only. I slowly turned toward Quentin. Divorce discussions? I asked. He looked away. Nobody needed further clarification. His silence answered. I turned back to Shanice. Did he tell you anything about our finances? Quentin's stomach visibly tightened. Shanice shook her head. No, she said. Nothing. I asked. No, she said. I smiled politely. I thought so. Velma leaned forward. What does money have to do with any of this? She asked. Not much yet, I said. Something about that answer bothered Velma, but pride kept her upright. For years you have treated marriage like a business arrangement, she said. And a man needs affection. A few people looked at Quentin, waiting for him to interrupt. He did not. Velma gained confidence. You have been more committed to contracts than your husband. I considered her words and said, Interesting. Interesting. Velma asked. That is your response? I folded my arms. You think the biggest issue in our marriage is that I work? Is it not? She asked. No, I said. Quentin became very interested in the floor because he knew the real issue. I did not say it yet. Instead, I sat down. Everyone thought the confrontation had ended. It had not. I was simply letting them finish building the record. The dinner resumed awkwardly. Plates moved. People forced nervous laughter. I barely spoke for the rest of the evening. I watched Quentin's relatives watch me. I watched Shanice shrink into herself. I watched Velma smile as if she had won a prize she could not yet afford. By the end of the night, I knew who felt ashamed, who enjoyed the cruelty, who would later pretend they had not understood, and who had stayed quiet because comfort mattered more than truth. After the guests left, Quentin followed me into the library. I opened my book as if nothing unusual had happened. You are not going to say anything? He asked. I looked up. About what? I asked. You know exactly what that dinner was, he said. Yes, I said. What would you like me to say? Quentin stared because he did not actually know. Part of him wanted shouting, tears, insults, anything emotional enough to help him feel justified. I gave him none of it. Mariah, are you upset? He asked. I closed my book. I am disappointed, I said. The words landed harder than yelling. That is it, he asked. No, I said, standing. I am embarrassed for everyone involved. Then I walked upstairs and left him there. For the first time that evening, I saw fear enter his face. Not guilt. Not yet. Fear. He had watched his mother humiliate me, allowed his girlfriend to be seated like a future wife, and expected me to compete. Instead, I had taken notes without touching a pen. The following weeks changed everything. Velma became bolder because she interpreted my silence as weakness. She discussed Shanice at gatherings, family lunches, community events, and anywhere people would listen. The story changed each time. Soon I was cold, detached, and impossible to love. Soon after that, Shanice became Quentin's next wife, as if desire could erase a marriage certificate. One Sunday afternoon, Velma hosted lunch at her home in Silver Spring. Shanice attended. Quentin attended. Several cousins attended. The conversation turned toward the future. When Quentin settles everything, they will probably move into the house, Velma said. Shanice smiled. The house is beautiful, she said. Quentin stopped eating. One cousin looked confused. Move into what house? He asked. The mansion, Velma said, laughing lightly. The Whitfield house. The cousin nearly choked on his drink. Unlike Velma, he had heard enough rumors to be cautious. Is that Quentin's house? He asked. Velma waved her hand. Of course it is. He looked at Quentin. Quentin looked away, and that told him enough. Another relative said carefully, I thought the property was in Mariah's name. Velma dismissed it. That does not matter. Several relatives exchanged worried looks. The cousin stayed quiet because he did not know the whole structure and would not announce a truth he could not prove. But doubt entered the room, and once doubt enters, pride has to work harder. While they planned my future without me, I continued my routine. Business meetings, property inspections, board reviews, investment evaluations. Life moved forward. The drama at home barely interrupted my schedule because I had already separated emotion from procedure. One Tuesday morning, I sat in a conference room overlooking downtown Washington, D.C. Across from me sat Donovan Price, the attorney who had represented my father, my company, and my personal interests for years. Donovan asked, How are things? I smiled. Entertaining, I said. He sighed. I have heard rumors. I am sure you have, I said. Are they true? He asked. Most of them, I said. He leaned back. Do you intend to do anything? Not yet, I said. Donovan nodded. Patience was my strongest weapon. Passive people avoid action. Patient people choose timing. I always chose timing. He opened a folder and slid a paper toward me. There is one thing you should know, Donovan said. What is it? I asked. Quentin's attorney sent a preliminary discovery inquiry through the proper channels. They are asking about marital assets, title records, business interests, and ownership structures. My eyes narrowed slightly. So he is planning, I said. It appears so, Donovan said. I read the request twice, not angry, just curious. Then I laughed softly. Donovan raised an eyebrow. That sounds expensive, I said. For him, it could become very expensive, Donovan replied. As I left that meeting, something became clear. Quentin was not merely having an affair. He was calculating an exit. That mattered because planning means expectation, and expectation built on false information is a dangerous thing. Across town, Velma and Shanice had become close. Velma treated her like the daughter-in-law she believed she deserved. They shopped for furniture, looked at paint colors, discussed guest rooms, and spoke of my home as if I were already packed and gone. That sectional would look beautiful in the sitting room, Velma said one afternoon. Shanice smiled. It really would. Neither woman noticed how many assumptions lived inside that sentence. The sitting room. Not my residence. Just a room they had already stolen in their minds. A month later, Quentin finally brought up divorce. The conversation happened in the kitchen on a quiet Thursday evening. I was pouring tea when he walked in, nervous and restless. We need to talk, he said. Okay, I replied. He swallowed. I think we should separate. I nodded once. All right. The response stunned him. That is it, he asked. What else? I said. You do not have anything to say, he asked. Would it change your mind? I asked. He hesitated. No, I lifted my cup. Then there is not much to discuss. He stared at me because I refused to give him the reaction he wanted. Finally, he said, We will need lawyers. Of course, I said. I have already spoken to someone. I assumed you had, I said. His heartbeat seemed to quicken. You understand there will be asset discussions, Quentin said. There it was. The real conversation at last. I slowly placed my cup down. What assets? I asked. He blinked. What do you mean? What assets are you referring to? I asked. Our assets, he said. Our assets. I repeated. Yes, he said, but less confidently. I stared at him long enough for uncertainty to appear. Then I said the sentence that would keep him awake for weeks. Quentin, before you start counting money, make sure you know who owns it. The room went silent. His stomach tightened. He knew something was wrong, but I picked up my tea and walked away. A week later, Quentin sat inside his attorney's office expecting strategy and walked out with panic. His attorney reviewed the title records, trust documents, business registrations, and separate property agreement before looking up. "We need to discuss expectations," the attorney said. "What kind of settlement are we looking at?" Quentin asked. The attorney paused. "That depends on the ownership records." Quentin shifted. "The house is marital property," he said. "Are you certain?" the attorney asked. "Of course," Quentin replied. The attorney opened another file. The silence stretched. Finally, he said, "The residence appears to have been acquired through an inheritance trust before and during the marriage under protected terms. Your name is not on the title." Quentin stared at the document. His name was nowhere. "Only mine." "There must be a mistake," Quentin said. "I do not believe so," the attorney replied. Quentin forced a laugh. "The business, then?" The attorney stayed silent. Quentin stopped laughing. "The company?" he asked. The attorney folded his hands. "Whitfield Commercial Holdings belongs to Mariah. The operating entities, investment accounts, and commercial properties appear to be connected to her inheritance and protected by the agreement you signed." Quentin's face drained of color. "No," he said. "Yes," the attorney replied. "No," Quentin repeated, but denial was not evidence. In that moment, his imagined life began to collapse. The house, the company, the properties, the investments, the status, the comfort, the future he had already promised Shanice. That evening, Quentin drove straight to Velma's house. She opened the door smiling until she saw his face. "What happened?" she asked. He walked inside. "We have a problem," he said. "What kind of problem?" "The house," he said. "What about it?" Velma asked. "It belongs to Mariah." Velma laughed. "No, it does not." "It does," Quentin said. Her laughter stopped. "Marriage changes things," she said, clinging to the only phrase she had. "Not the way you think," Quentin answered. "The company then?" she asked. He said nothing. Now she was nervous. "The company too?" Quentin nodded. Velma sat down slowly. "No," she whispered. "Yes," he said. Their denials sounded almost identical because neither had ever been supported by facts. "There must still be money," Velma said. This time Quentin answered. "My salary is mine and my personal savings are limited. I have debt from the venture, and most of my lifestyle came from living with Mariah." Velma stared at him as if he had spoken another language. The future she had decorated vanished piece by piece. "Across town, I was having dinner with Donovan. He reviewed another document and said, 'They have discovered the ownership records.' I smiled. That took longer than expected. Donovan chuckled. I thought so too. How did they react? I asked. Painfully, he said. You understand what comes next? Of course, I replied. Are you ready? He asked. I looked out at the street. It is not about being ready. It is about being finished. The first formal mediation session happened the following week. Quentin arrived with his attorney. I arrived with Donovan. The mediator began with standard procedures, formalities, and a reminder that state law considers several factors, including commingling, appreciation, and signed agreements. Then the documents came out. Property records, trust arrangements, investment statements, business registrations, the separate property agreement Quentin had signed before the wedding and barely read. Each page reinforced the same reality. The primary residence remained mine under the inheritance trust. The commercial holdings remained mine. The inherited investment accounts remained mine. And the assets Quentin had imagined dividing were not available to be divided the way he expected. The mediator adjusted his glasses. This appears relatively straightforward, he said. Straightforward. The word sounded almost cruel because every page dismantled assumptions Quentin had carried for years. The lifestyle he enjoyed had never actually belonged to him. He had benefited from it, presented it as his own, and let another woman believe she was stepping into it. But access and ownership are not the same thing. When the meeting ended, Quentin stayed seated while everyone else gathered papers. I was almost at the door when he spoke. Why did you not tell me? He asked. I turned. Tell you what? I said. That everything was yours, he said. I looked at him for several moments. You never asked, I said. The words landed with devastating simplicity because they were true. He never asked. His mother never asked. Shanice never asked. They assumed. He looked down. You could have corrected me, he said. I could have, I replied. Why did you not? He asked. My expression softened, not with affection, but with disappointment. Because I thought you married me, I said. The room fell silent. Nobody had an answer. I picked up my briefcase and walked out, leaving the truth behind me. For the first time since the affair began, Quentin fully understood what he had lost. Not money, not property, not status. A woman who had stood beside him when she never needed him. A woman who had protected his pride while he was busy betraying hers. 3 days later, Velma appeared unannounced at my residence shortly after noon. The same residence she had spent months calling Quentin's house and mentally redecorating for Shanice. The housekeeper answered the door, and a few minutes later I walked into the sitting room. Velma stood immediately. "This is not over," she said. I sat down. "Actually, it is," I said. She pointed at me. "You manipulated everyone." "How?" I asked. "You let us believe Quentin owned things." I almost smiled. "You believed what benefited you. The records were public." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Property ownership and business registrations were not secret. The information had always existed. Nobody bothered to verify it. Velma paced the room. "My son spent years in this family," she said. "He did," I replied. "He helped build this life," she said. I nodded once. "He lived in it." The distinction landed hard. Her face reddened. "You are acting superior." "No," I said. "I am answering your questions." For a moment, she looked exhausted, not proud, not powerful, just tired. Then her expression hardened again. "What about Shanice?" she asked. "What about her?" I said. "She loves Quentin." I looked at Velma for several seconds. "Are you sure?" I asked. She frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means people sometimes love an image," I said. The room went quiet. Shanice had loved a version of Quentin built from omissions, borrowed comfort, and promises he could not keep. Velma left without victory. The door closed behind her, and I felt relief for the first time in months. Meanwhile, a different conversation was unfolding across town. Shanice had learned the truth 2 days earlier after a relative sent her links to public property records, and after she overheard Quentin arguing with his attorney on the phone. She met him at a coffee shop in Rockville. Neither touched their drinks. "Why?" Shanice asked. Quentin looked away. "Why did you lie?" she asked. His silence answered first. "You told me the marriage was basically over. You told me divorce discussions had started. You told me your life was completely different." Her voice rose enough that nearby tables turned. "Answer me," she said. Quentin rubbed his forehead. "It was not like that." Shanice laughed bitterly. "That is your defense?" "I cared about you," Quentin said. Shanice wiped her eyes, angry at herself for crying. "No," she said. "You cared about how I made you feel. You let me walk into another woman's home with flowers while your mother presented me like a prize. You watched me embarrass myself because the lie made you feel important." Quentin had no answer. For months, he had created a reality that served him. Not me. Not Shanice. Him. And now both women were paying for it in different ways. Shanice stood. "What happens now?" she asked. Quentin looked helpless. She nodded sadly. "That is what I thought." Then she walked away and did not come back. The divorce moved forward over the next several months, not instantly, but cleanly. There were negotiations over personal items, retirement contributions earned during the marriage, temporary support requests, and ordinary marital accounts. Donovan handled every detail with precision. Quentin left the mediation table with far less than he expected and more humility than he wanted. He moved into a modest apartment in Columbia, Maryland. Nothing luxurious, nothing humiliating, just ordinary. For the first time in years, he lived entirely within his own means. The adjustment bruised his pride daily. He had to explain to friends why the mansion was no longer available, why the company car was gone, why the invitations changed, and why the future he had described so confidently had disappeared. Velma struggled even more. Relatives quietly distanced themselves, not only because of the affair or divorce, but because of the arrogance. She had publicly celebrated my humiliation before understanding the situation. People remembered that. At a family barbecue months later, conversations slowed when she approached. Not completely, just enough for her to feel it. For the first time, she understood the temperature of a room that had decided to judge you quietly. Shanice rebuilt her career with the event management firm and avoided the Whitfield family entirely. She sent me one letter, brief and honest, saying she was sorry for believing a story that had made me the villain. I did not need the apology, but I respected it. As for me, life became quieter, which was exactly what I wanted. I focused on Whitfield Commercial Holdings. We closed a warehouse automation deal outside Philadelphia that increased operating margins, and I promoted the project manager who had carried the work without demanding credit. I sold one underperforming property, expanded a trucking contract in Richmond, and returned home at night to a house that finally felt peaceful again. About a year later, I attended a commercial real estate conference in Dallas, Texas. Shanice was there coordinating the investor reception for her firm, which explained the encounter instead of making it feel like fate. When she saw me, she looked nervous. "Mariah," she said. "Hello, Shanice," I replied. We moved to a quieter corner. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Shanice said, "I owe you an apology." I shook my head. "You were misled." "I was still involved," she said. "And I walked into your home." "At some point," I said, "we all have to decide what we do with the information we have." Her eyes filled, but she held herself together. "He made me feel like you were already gone," she said. "I know," I replied. "But I was still there. That was enough. We did not become friends, and we did not need to. We simply ended the conversation like two adults who had survived the same man's selfishness." I saw Quentin one last time outside Donovan's office after the final papers were signed. He looked older, thinner, and less certain of himself. "Mariah," he said, stopping me near the elevator. "I know I cannot fix this." "No," I said. "You cannot." He swallowed. "I am sorry." I believed him, but belief did not rebuild what he burned. He looked at the floor. "I lost everything," he said. I held his gaze and gave him the final truth he had earned. "No, Quentin. You lost the woman who paid your debts, protected your name, prayed for your success, and stood beside you when you had nothing to offer but promises. Everything else was just furniture." His face broke before the elevator doors opened. Years later, relatives still talked about that dinner. They remembered the flowers, the silence, Velma's confidence, Quentin's cowardice, and the moment everyone realized the woman they tried to replace had never been the powerless one at the table. I did not need to shout to win. I did not need to beg to be chosen. I simply let the truth arrive with documents in its hand. Velma lost the respect she tried to use against me. Shanice lost the illusion she had been sold. Quentin lost access to the life he mistook for his own. And I kept the one thing none of them could divide, transfer, contest, or take from me: the dignity I carried out of that dining room when they expected me to fall apart. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.